Hi guys, this is Amanda and I'm filming a little bit of a different video today. Basically, I'm just going to be showing you some time-lapsed footage of some illustrations that you haven't seen yet here on my channel, or at least you haven't seen the making of the illustration. But the point of this video is less about what you see and more about what you're hearing. So if you want to just put this video on in the background while you're drawing or cleaning or doing your homework, go right ahead. Today I'm going to be talking about my relationship with art. In a more specific sense, I'm going to be talking about my relationship with art as a form of self-care and how that's changed over the past couple of years, with a heavy focus on just the past couple of months. Basically, art has always been a part of my life ever since I can remember. I've literally been selling my own art since I was 8 years old. I've always identified as an artist. It's just always been a part of who I am. I honestly can't envision what my life would be like without art. Like, really, when I sit down and think about it, I can't picture myself not being an artist. I can't picture myself living somewhere and not having a space where I do art. And I've been doing art every single day for years. Now, the thing is, when I was a teenager and I was nearing the end of high school, thinking about my future, art never really came up for me as something I wanted to do for my career. I always thought that art is my thing, art is something for me. I'll never do it as a job because then it won't feel genuine. You know, it won't feel like it's mine, and it won't feel like what I love about art, which is that freedom and that just genuine expression if I'm having to do that for somebody else in order to earn a living. So I had tossed around the idea of going to school for art, but it really was never something that I strongly considered. And when it came time for me to go to college, I decided to pursue a degree in psychology. Psychology is something I've always been interested in. I feel like my brain is wired towards social sciences rather than more hard traditional sciences. So it seemed like a pretty good fit. Albeit my intro to psych class in high school was awful, I still had this sense that that was the direction I wanted to go in my life. And art would always just be like a side thing. So I did that. I went away for my first year of college and didn't really bring any art supplies with me. I liked my classes, I liked my friends, and I enjoyed what I was doing. But I found myself kind of being pulled back to those artistic roots. I would doodle in class and I would draw on notebook paper, and it was just like being a 13-year-old kid in middle school again, where I was doodling anime characters on literally every viable surface that I could, which sent the message to myself that I couldn't let art go that easy. So when I went home for winter break, my first year of college, I gathered up just my few core art supplies. I remember I had one of those clear acrylic boxes that the Copic sets come in, and I filled it with just my 36 most used markers, and they were all like grays, warm grays, cool grays, and neutrals. And I remember I had like a little Strathmore sketchbook and like a bigger, cheaper sketchbook that was like horrible. And that's what I brought back with me after winter break. I brought back just these core art supplies that I could keep in my dorm room. I didn't have to worry about my entire Copic set getting stolen or damaged while I was away at school, because I just had a few core items. And it's around this time, too, that I had started the hashtag Artsy Fartsy Friday. It was very casual. It was not really meant to be an ongoing series, but it dates back to around this time where I started using my Copics again. I started sketching and drawing again, and my friends in college were starting to notice that I was an artist and that I was creative. I took a few art classes here and there, mostly as GPA boosters, and they were all entry-level classes. So it was like art history, where they had like art labs that I was able to kind of like create these little projects for. And I loved those classes, but I was also reminded of why I didn't think art was going to be a good fit for me long term. To me, I always had this impression that art school and art programs were kind of ruthless and soul-crushing, and I just really was very protective of the space that art had in my life, and I didn't want anyone to threaten that or take it away. It was my thing, and nobody was going to infringe on my thing. So I kept drawing pretty casually throughout freshman and sophomore year of college. As I got into sophomore year of college, the frequency of my drawings was increasing quite a bit. I was dabbling around in the very early version of Procreate. I was doing a lot of fan art, and I was just having fun. I think for me, it really was just a casual hobby that I did in my downtime, and I had a lot of downtime in those days after class. I would usually get off sometime in the early afternoon, and then I would have the whole day to nap and watch Netflix and draw. It was literally just the ideal creative environment for me. And as I continued into my later years of college, I discovered YouTube. And I'd been a big YouTube watcher in the beauty community, but never so much in the art community. And it wasn't until someone on DeviantArt, Martha, she knows who she is, she's amazing. She also goes by Marty on Twitter, but I was really inspired by her art, and I had messaged her on DeviantArt asking if she could give me any tips or tutorials or just general advice. And she said, I don't really have any advice, but I know some people who do. And she kind of pointed me to the YouTube art community, and she recommended Lemia Crescent and Bailey J. And from there, it really took off. I was super inspired by what these people were doing. The fact that they were making videos and earning a little bit of money doing what they loved seemed like the ideal job for me. I had a tiny little point and shoot camera, and I had a semi-functional desk with really, really poor lighting. I had a dinky little tripod, and I basically just decided that I wanted to do the dang thing, and I wanted to try making videos. I was super awkward on camera. I had 2 roommates at the time, and I would refuse to film if they were home. But that's how I got my start, and it really just snowballed from there. I kind of jumped in head first with YouTube and decided, if I'm going to do this, I'm going to do this full force. I'm going to do 1 video a week. I'm going to keep that schedule. This is where Artsy Fartsy Friday really solidified itself in my mind, because not only was I posting on Instagram, but now I was posting on YouTube, and I would do it every single Friday. And that was just my thing, and it was cool, and it was fun, and my videos weren't great. They weren't revolutionary by any means. It was almost exclusively marker art, and I enjoyed it. It was fun. I was not earning any money off of it at the time, but I was making some cool friends in the art community, and it really just felt like it was my place. I wasn't concerned about earning money. I wasn't concerned about making this a viable career. I was just wanting to do something with my free time. And the fact of the matter was, I was creating the art anyway. So turning it into a video wasn't that much extra work, at least initially. So as I'm finishing up college, I am looking into my next step, which for me was pretty much set in stone that I was going to pursue my master's degree. I was working part-time at a bank, and I had my own little apartment. And at this point, I was wanting to branch out more into this artist, content creator world. I tabled at my first convention, which was Las Cruces Comic-Con. It was in my college town. Super small convention, and my best convention still to this date. I sold a lot of my original art. I did this convention completely by myself, set up by myself, did it by myself the whole weekend, and I was terrified. I bought way too much stock, and I loved it. I felt so invigorated after that weekend, and it was seriously such an adrenaline rush and just a confidence boost. Like, doing conventions made me feel something I'd never felt before, which was feeling like, oh my gosh, I belong in this kingdom of nerds, and this is my place, and this is like my jam. I did another convention shortly after that, and around that time I was moving in with my boyfriend. I was moving to a new city, and I was heavily applying to graduate schools. I was interviewing, and the application process was super stressful, but then I got into my top school, which is the school that I just graduated from a couple of weeks ago. When I was living with my boyfriend, I was not working at another job. I had left my job at the bank because I moved to a new city, and I really thought to myself, this is not going to be downtime. This is going to be like hustle time. This is going to be really going all in with your videos. If you're not working, let's at least try and make the art thing more of a business. And I think this is really where that pressure to amp up my art came from. And not even so much my art, but my videos. In fact, I think the focus at this point really did shift away from the art, or at least the quality of the art, and focused on quantity and making videos. And I think I was posting 3 videos a week around this time, which was insane and not really sustainable, but I did it for, I think, like almost a year. I posted 3 videos a week. And so some of my best videos to this day, I think, were filmed when I was living with my boyfriend in our apartment before moving to San Diego. They're some of the videos I'm most proud of. It was one of my favorite workspaces that I ever had, and I just loved creating all day. I loved being home all day, making videos, editing, making art, and it was awesome. Granted, at this time, my channel was still pretty small. I'd only done 2 conventions at this time. I had just launched my store, Envy, and things were still pretty quiet. When we were getting ready to move to San Diego, things art-wise for me looked a little bit different. My workspace was now in the middle of our living room because we only had a tiny 1-bedroom apartment. Things were super expensive. Lighting in my videos was really difficult, but it was really an exciting time for me still, and because I hadn't started school yet, I was still going full force on videos. I was vlogging, I was posting 2 art videos a week, and I still loved it because when I moved to the new city and I was in a new place and all of these new changes were happening, YouTube and art was the thing that was most consistent to me. And I think thriving on YouTube always gave me a lot of confidence, but I think it's important for me to point out that, like, all the while I'm posting on YouTube, I'm also posting on all my other social media. I'd given up on DeviantArt by this point. I kind of laid that to rest, but I was really trying to grow on Instagram, and that had always been really tedious. And I think that lack of growth on Instagram has always kind of affected my self-esteem as a content creator, because it just feels like no matter what I do, it kind of stagnates. So Instagram, in contrast with YouTube, like they've always gone hand in hand for me, but they've always impacted me mentally very differently. So I start my graduate program, which, unlike undergrad, is asking a lot less of me as far as like papers and homework goes, but it's asking a lot of me emotionally. It's a huge emotional investment, and it's really kind of pushing my emotional boundaries, and they call it really a period of growth, and you experience these kind of growing pains. The first year of that is evident, but not as evident as the second year of my program, and it's a 2 to 2.5 year program. For me, it was 2.5 years because of my internship. The whole time that I'm in my graduate program, the first couple of months or so, I would say like the first 6 months, I did not talk about art with my peers. I didn't talk about my YouTube. I was even like terrified of people at school finding out that I have an art Instagram, and I like didn't want them to follow me over there, because I was so set in this idea that I had to keep those worlds separate. I didn't want the faculty to find out that I had a YouTube channel, and I didn't want them to know that I kind of had this side hustle on the internet, because I was terrified that they would tell me that I needed to stop and that I couldn't do that. And that was just always my biggest fear. I didn't know how I would respond if that happened. So that wasn't a super sustainable model. It never has been. Eventually, some of my closer friends found out that I did have an Instagram and that I do have a YouTube channel, and they've always been very supportive of that. It just always feels weird when people from your quote-unquote real life find out about like your internet alter ego almost. And I don't know, just worlds colliding is something that's always been very uncomfortable for me. So I survived the first year of my program. I made some of the best friends that I'll ever have. I had some of the most amazing and incredible experiences. I went to Europe for the first time. Out of the country in general for the first time, on a really kind of life-altering trip for me. And I felt like I grew a lot, and I thought I had kind of met that quota for emotional growth in that first year of my program. Mind you, at this time, at the start of around 2018, I was applying for my internship, which is part of my program. You have to sign up for a 1-year internship, and you're basically committed to that site for a year, and you're supposed to get up to 500 hours working with clients, which I guess I didn't really clarify. My master's degree is in marriage and family therapy. So I took my psychology bachelor's degree, and I decided I didn't really want to do research, but I want to do therapy, I want to do counseling, and I want to work in the mental health field. So I was looking for therapy programs. Originally, I did look at art therapy programs, but something that always rubbed me the wrong way about them is that they favor an art degree over a psychology degree. And to me, using art in therapy does not require you to be a master of art, but you probably should know a thing or two about therapy. And so the fact that they kind of favored art over the psychology background was just a red flag to me. And so I didn't end up applying to any art therapy programs, largely because I couldn't, because I didn't major in art in college, and I wasn't going to take a bunch of extra art classes just to be able to get my master's in art therapy. So I kind of switched gears a little bit and decided I'm going to do marriage and family therapy, which still checks all of the boxes for me. It still allows me to do what I want to do. And who says I can't make art a part of that therapeutic process, you know? And this is something that a good friend of mine here on YouTube, Jennifer Charlie, talks a lot about, the difference between art therapy and art in therapy. What I do on my day-to-day life is more art in therapy, but not art as therapy. There's a lot of differences in just how it's used and how it's interpreted, and so it looks a little bit different. But, I work with a population that it just makes sense to use art sometimes. It's just part of the job. Like, you have to be flexible, you have to be creative, and so I use art a lot in that way, but I'm very careful about how I use it, again, because worlds colliding makes me just really uncomfortable. So anyway, beginning of 2018, I got my internship, and I started my internship the fall of 2018. So I had basically like the summer after I finished classes to when my internship started to just, again, do YouTube. And I loved it. I found it a little bit more difficult to manage. I had to cut down to one video a week shortly after my classes started in my master's program, and I found myself just not being able to make the videos that I wanted to make. I was a broke student, so it's not like I could go and buy art supplies all the time or buy the newest products to review. So I did struggle a little bit with just what videos to even make and what people wanted to watch from me, because there was a noticeable shift this time in the community away from speed paints and towards challenges and trends and a lot more out of the box art videos that didn't even so much focus on art but focused on entertainment. And that was not really my thing. I made videos to demonstrate techniques to people. I wouldn't even really call them tutorials because I don't think I'm the best tutorial maker. I don't know if I really call myself like a teacher or if I consider teaching to be one of my strengths, but showing people what I do was always kind of my strong point. When it was shifting away from showing people what you do towards make people entertained, make them keep watching, make them laugh, I've got to be honest, it felt a little weird. Like, I didn't really know how to do that. And I didn't want to pretend to do it just to survive on a platform. So there was a lot of challenges with that at this point as well. When I started my internship, I had told myself that I knew art and YouTube were going to take a backseat. Again, I started my internship being very tight-lipped about even my interest in art, even the fact that I posted it on Instagram, let alone had a YouTube channel. I was very closed off about that, again, because my biggest fear is having my worlds collide in a way that's out of my control. Especially being a therapist, I don't want potential clients or their families to find out I have a YouTube channel and then that somehow affect or impair that therapeutic relationship and hinder that relationship, because now I'm not their therapist, now I'm a person on YouTube. And so I'm still very wary of that to this day. I think about it and my stomach drops because I never want my passion for art to get in the way of my career of helping people. Because to me, that would feel kind of selfish. Which is really where all of my kind of spiraling thoughts and my identity crises have been born out of. From the time I started my internship, I felt like I just could not balance these two things the way that I did before. I posted tons of videos in college and it never impacted my ability to perform as a student. Even in grad school, I was still able to sustain a pretty regular channel without it affecting my ability to be a student. I honestly couldn't really handle it. The video content was being rushed. The art was pretty insignificant. It felt like it was just being made because I had to make something and not so much because I wanted to make something. And it felt stale, I think, for me. And I think that was evident in a lot of the videos that I was making. And it was because the videos that I knew how to make and were quick to make were not the videos that YouTube wanted to see anymore. Time lapses and speed paints are a thing of the past. They're effectively dead on YouTube. Now, people still post time-lapsed clips of them coloring and drawing, just like I'm doing here. But the purpose of the video and the message of the video is not about what's being shown. It's like I'm doing here. It's about what's being said. It's about what's being talked about. And so I feel like this was something that I could do. But again, I couldn't really share very openly about, my experience as an intern and as a therapist, because that would not be appropriate and it would not be professional. So a lot of kind of my feelings of being like stressed and overwhelmed were kind of just sitting with me, and were, I think, affecting me emotionally a lot more than I had realized, because by the time I finished my first semester of my internship, I was really going through like an identity crisis. I remember having thoughts to myself like, all I'm doing is being a therapist and being an artist, and I feel like I'm not doing either of those things well. Not to mention, my social relationships were really suffering. I felt like I was being a bad friend, a bad girlfriend, a bad daughter, because I was putting all of my time and energy into just sustaining myself as an artist and a therapist. It was like outside of my internship and YouTube, nothing existed. And nothing else mattered, because I just needed to keep these two things afloat. I needed to be a therapist and I needed to be an artist, and I needed to be good at both of those things, because that was all I am. I think I really removed those other factors. I am a friend, I am a daughter, I am a girlfriend. I kind of removed those from myself because I didn't have the emotional energy to be those things. So I wasn't good at those things either. At least I didn't feel like I was at the time. And then the two kind of core parts of my identity were also being kind of shaken. It's like, whoa, if I'm not good at art, then what am I? Like, who am I? I guess it was like spring 2019. So just a few months ago, this was really all bubbling to the surface. And I created a little mini comic called Blocked. And that was really when these feelings were just completely out of my control. And I was really going through them. So that is up on my Instagram. But basically it's just about juggling being a person while also being this content creator. And what I touched on there was really that it's not like I didn't want to draw. I wanted to draw. I wanted to create things. I just didn't have the time to create things that I wanted to create. And my art was suffering and my channel was suffering, and not having the time and energy to do something that you're really passionate about sucks. And so that was when I was really kind of having to look at the viability of what I was doing. This was not sustainable. Being an artist and a therapist in the way that I was doing was not working. And I think at that point, a lot of scary questions come up of, well, which do I give up? I'm towards the end of my program to be a therapist. I've just put so much money towards this degree. I can't give that up. Like, surely that's not a possibility. Like, no, it wasn't even on the table. At the same time, stopping art was also never on the table. like I mentioned in the beginning, I cannot picture myself as anything other than an artist. I cannot picture myself without doing art. I kind of stewed in those feelings for a while. I really did. And it wasn't until around the end of April, May, June, which was just a really crazy time for me. I had about a period of 7 weeks where I was out of town. My grandma passed away, and then I was volunteering at a grief camp the following week after my grandma's funeral. And then I had to go back to New Mexico for a graduation, and then it was my graduation, and then we had a friend in town, and then we were out of town, and then I was emotionally just like depleted, guys. Like I don't even know how I got through those weeks, and like when I look back on it, they're a blur. Like I can barely even remember what was going on at that time, and I think it was just because I had my head down and I was just trying to get through it. When I was literally running on fumes, basically on empty emotionally, I realized, wait a minute, I've been calling art self-care for years. Like if I do, for how often I do art, should I not be more at ease? Should I not be more mentally sound than I am, given how much I do art as self-care? And that was when I really had to sit down and have a very blunt conversation with myself. And I basically had to tell myself, art is not self-care. Art has not been self-care for a very long time. The minute that art became a job, it stopped being self-care. And that is still something that I'm sitting with, and that was why I eventually ended up wanting to make this video, was because I was grappling with this idea, like, wait a minute, I love art. I never want to stop doing art. Doesn't that mean it's like self-care? Like, doesn't that mean it's like a passion of mine, and that I should always want to do it because it makes me feel good? And I think that's where the question comes, like, okay, well, yeah, art can make you feel good, but is something self-care just because it makes you feel good? Maybe not. And I think there's definitely parts of art that are self-care. But if the camera's on and the deadline's there and I'm getting paid, I don't think that's self-care. I think that's a job. And it's a job that I'm passionate about. And it's a job that I'm so honored and lucky to have. But I was calling it self-care when it clearly wasn't. And that had long-term impacts on just my mental health, because I was pushing myself to the limit. I was working all day, 8 to 6, and then coming home and sitting down and working on art for a video that was supposed to go up the next day. Like, it was so not a healthy relationship. It was pretty toxic, just the way that I was pushing myself to do art and then calling it self-care. So I knew I kind of had to sit down and reevaluate things. And I think the minute that I was able to admit to myself that art is a business, I had a sense of relief. I really, really did. It was like a weight was lifted off my shoulders because I was finally able to call this what it was. Art is a job for me, and it's a job I love doing. But at the end of the day, it's a job. Which means now I need to find a form of self-care that is not like a job. I'm still trying to find out what that is, and I don't really know yet. But I also feel like this realization that art is my job and therapy is my job has given me a lot of hope, actually. And I don't want to end this like on a sad, somber note. It's inspired me a lot, actually, because now I realize I've learned a lot of skills through doing art as a business. I've learned how to market myself. I've learned how to build a platform and a brand. I know how to create content that supports that brand and delivers kind of that message that I'm trying to send. And I can use all of those skills as a therapist. And I can build my brand as a therapist just like I did as an artist. It gave me a lot of hope because now I feel like I can turn those skills that I learned as an artist into being a therapist. And it's something that I've been working on. I've been building a website for kind of like my therapist profile with my resume. And I want to make these kind of downloadable worksheets and like inspirational printouts for therapists. And that's something that I'm really passionate about because it's combining those two worlds in a way that feels good to me and that doesn't feel uncomfortable. So I'm letting my worlds collide a little bit in a way that's like controlled and feels safe for me. I'm also working on revamping a lot of the business side of my art world. I want to revamp my store. I took a lot of old prints off of my store, and I'm going to be changing the structure of the online store a little bit. I want to do kind of seasonal launches a couple of times a year over there where I create kind of a capsule of products, a couple of prints, a couple of sticker sheets, and I just released those on the store for a couple of months and then kind of close those out, discontinue them, and launch the next thing and the next thing and the next thing. So it's instead of just having an online store that's filled with a bunch of products that most people wouldn't take the time to look at, I'm going to kind of market a specific set of products for a few months at a time and then change it up and then promote the next thing. And that to me is like a viable business model. And what it also does is it allows me to differentiate between when I'm doing art for the business, which would be part of that kind of seasonal capsule release, and when I'm doing art just for me. So I can do kind of like, for example, for the month of September, I'm planning to release like a set of like 3 prints that are all kind of part of a series, and I'm planning to release 2 sticker sheets. So now I know when I am making art for that release and when I'm making art just for fun. If I want to do some anime fan art, I know that that's just for me and not for the store and not for the business. So in a way, it kind of just helps me compartmentalize things a little bit easier. I'm also planning to revamp my Patreon a little bit more, and I'm just restructuring things quite a bit. And it makes me really excited because now, not only did I go from calling art self-care when it wasn't, calling myself out and saying art is not self-care, but now I'm saying, okay, art can be self-care and it can also be my job. I just have to be clear about the boundaries. And that kind of leads me into my next point, which is kind of where I'm going to wrap up this video. I posed this question to you guys on Instagram, what you thought about art as a business and also self-care. And I wanted to kind of share some of your responses. So first of all, thank you for all of you who shared your thoughts with me. I think that that's really amazing. And I love that Instagram has this new chat feature where you can kind of pose a question to your audience and they respond to you. And it's kind of just a cool way to have that conversation. So the first response I'll read is from Jacob, who's a dear friend of mine, actually one of my longest friends. So he said, yes, this is an interesting concept. I think that jobs can be stressful and also rewarding, but for it to be self-care, you must remove the stress aspect and really do it for yourself. And I liked his response a lot. I feel like that part that he touches on, you have to do it for yourself and no one else, is exactly what I felt when I was, in my late teens, early 20s, and I was protective of art as something that was only for me and could not be a job. If I did art as a job, it meant not doing it for me, and that meant not doing what I loved. So for me, that was kind of really resonating with that part of myself at that time in my life. And the removing stress part of it is like, okay, yeah, if you're experiencing stress from something that you're calling self-care, like it's probably not self-care. So I feel like that's an important piece from this as well. The next response is from SM Art. I think I'm pronouncing that correctly. She says, ultimately, I think it's possible if the mindset is right. If you love doing art and creating, but stop creating for the reasons you loved about art in the first place, it's not going to be self-care. But if you can take a little bit of time every day to do whatever it is that speaks to you in that moment, I think it can be done. The job can absolutely overwhelm the fire, and it's probably a constant balancing act. I feel like that part, like the job can overwhelm your fire, that I was like, yes. At some point, and I think if I could pinpoint it back, kind of looking back on it now, I think the part where the job overwhelmed the fire happened around early to mid 2018, when I was just moving in with my boyfriend before we moved to San Diego. That is probably the time that I can pinpoint me leaning more towards the business rather than the passion, and looking at art as a business kind of sucked the passion out of it, and it also, the quality of my art suffered as well. So if I could pinpoint a time, I think that would be it. And then Jacob also responded to that saying, I agree, not losing focus on why you love to create is imperative. And that is something I definitely felt like I lost for a while and am now currently rediscovering. And so I totally love that Jacob and SM Art like hit on these points. They're really, really eloquent and well put. The next response is from Colby, also known as Bougiest Arts. Oh my gosh, I adore him. He's been such a huge, huge supporter, and he was super excited to answer this question. So I'll read his response. He said, I think art can still be considered self-care as long as the artist is being responsible with their time and making sure they are getting their work done on time. If the artist is not making their commissions and money makers a priority, then I think they're being irresponsible. Me personally, I grew up where work comes before play. So if I wanted to go out, my room better be clean or the dishes better be done. However, if the artist is getting distracted with other projects that aren't priority, then they might fall behind on their priority work and then in turn stress themselves out. I'm a victim of this as well, and I will start a project as a way of procrastinating a piece that I know needs to be of quality and will be the first to call it self-care. It's only okay if the artist is aware of their procrastination and know that it's not actually self-care. However, on the other hand, if an artist finishes everything they need to for the week, then why not waste some acrylic and do a pour for fun, you know? So I love this response for so many reasons. First of all, I feel like he's so wise beyond his years, and he's incredibly mature in the way that he's able to like express that, because I feel like I'm about to be 25 and I can't even express that because in my head it's just like a jumbled mess. So for me, like kind of reading his response was really powerful, because it's saying like, yeah, like do art for self-care, just like take care of the business part first. So for me, that means being clear about what the business part and what the self-care part is. And I think his point about procrastinating and calling it self-care is really, really powerful. I feel like that's not so much something that I struggle with, but it is something that I know probably a lot of you can relate to. So I feel like that idea that like you have a big project that has a deadline, but you're going to do something for fun, and call it self-care, like I could totally see that like impacting. I feel like I'm the opposite, where I will do a project that I know is very, very much a job and like very much for work, and I'll call that self-care. And that's where my biggest downfall is. But I love these responses, you guys, and I would really love if we could continue this conversation about art as self-care in the comment sections of this video. And so if you have experience, any experience really from any background, I'm curious to know if you are doing a job that is also your hobby and your passion, how do you find that balance? And it doesn't necessarily have to be art, but if you are in a creative field, I feel like your feedback is especially appreciated here. But I just want to hear from a variety of people and just get some thoughts on this matter, because I feel like the more I talk to people about it, the more clear I actually am about the resolution within myself. So even just within the last couple of months, I feel like I've totally had a turnaround in how I look at this situation, which is why I wanted to sit down and just talk with you guys about it, because it's been such a big journey for me over a period of literally 4 or 5 years to get to this point. And if listening to an hour-long video of me talking helps get you there faster, then I'll do that. So I know probably a lot of you did not sit down and listen to this whole thing, and that is perfectly okay. I appreciate those of you who tuned in, and I especially appreciate those of you who responded to the question on Instagram and gave me your feedback. You guys are amazing. I wanted to quickly shout out my Patreon members. Patreon structure will be changing in August, so I will be posting updates about that very, very soon. Stay tuned for that. The August newsletter will probably be out a little bit early, just to explain that structure a little bit. But if you are wanting to pledge over on Patreon, there's going to be some new and exciting changes over there. So take a look. The link is going to be in the description bar down below. And thank you guys again for watching. I hope you enjoyed, and I will talk to you later, and I will see you on the internet. Bye, guys.